All right. Well, it's thanks very much, Billy. It's wonderful to be here, and I must say that because I'm sort of Billy's age, and we played in a different era than Shane and Dave, and I love watching the current group of hockey players like you do, Mike, because it's so fast and skilled. But back in Billy and I's day, and I know Bob Bassin is here, Jordy Douglas, Ed Stanowski, former players, we just played in a different era, so there was a lot more hooking, holding, slashing, fighting, and all that kind of stuff, and the refs used to pick on me quite a bit. So that's
probably...
Yeah. So Mike, I'm going to ask you a few questions and stuff. You know, you had a love for baseball, and you went and watched your first hockey game and stuff like that. What was it about hockey, watching your first game or whatever, that you chose hockey as opposed to baseball?
It was the hooking, the holding, the grabbing, the fighting. Honestly, that's what it was. I saw my first game in Fort Wayne, Indiana in 1960. I'd seen games on television, but when you see a game in person, and I think a lot of you here may have been the same way, you can remember your very first game, and if you remember getting into and seeing the warm-up and the rink, when I walked into the rink in Fort Wayne, I'd never been in a place like that before. I didn't know why the Zamboni didn't chew up the red lines and the blue lines and deposit them in the bin behind, but it didn't matter. I'd never seen guys go so fast. I'd never seen uniforms so bright before, and I didn't know that when they had collisions, that they could get up and continue playing, and I'd wanted to be a baseball announcer until that night. It was an epiphany, and I was hooked on hockey from seeing a game live. And that's what happened to me that night, and it probably happened to a lot of you when you saw your first game. And unlike today, I couldn't go out and buy gear to wear. I see all the Blues gear that you're wearing. We couldn't buy Fort Wayne Comets gear back then. They sold ties that had the little spaceman on it. I got one for Christmas. That was as close as we could come back then, but that's what hooked me, and I wanted to be an announcer from that point on.
Well, Mike, you've done many interviews, and one of the interviews that you talked about, an HBO interview, you said that for 9 minutes and 34 seconds was the duration without a stop of a whistle. So what in the world are you saying in 9 minutes and 34 seconds?
It's the easiest sport to do. It may seem like it's harder, but unlike football, we don't have to wait for players to unpile, and in baseball, you don't have that time between pitches. In hockey, it's continuous action. And so we do have people that are there with us, like today it'll be Eddie Olczyk and Pierre Maguire and Brian Boucher, but if the game doesn't stop, it's all you. And so you just are translating from the eye to the brain to the mouth, and it's nonstop, continuous flow. Some days better than others, just like anything else, but it's nonstop. And so I think that makes our game the easiest to describe. You don't have that time to fill in. It's wonderful. It's a blessing to go to work every day. Most everybody that you run into is happy, unless they've been suspended by the league. They're usually very happy, and it's a pleasant work atmosphere to be in. I just count myself lucky after 47 years to still be able to do it.
Yeah. Even with, I know Chico Resch, a former colleague of yours, is in the, like, even working with Chico, like that's enjoyable.
There are all kinds of caveats, and since one of the things you do before an All-Star game is prepare. In 1984, Chico Resch was in goal in the third period of the All-Star game at the Meadowlands, and with his team ahead, there was a goaltender interference minor penalty, except he was the goalie who committed the interference penalty with his team in the lead. They still won the game. And he was mic'd up on Hockey Night in Canada. We think these things only happen now. No, that was 1984. When he did that, he's shaking his head, but his team won the game.
That's great. So, Doc, you've done an incredible 6 Winter Olympics, and in the 2014 Winter Olympics, talk about your connection with David Backus and your love for dogs.
Well, it actually goes back to 2010, because what they tell us to do at Olympic Games is to tell stories, because unlike statistics, people will remember stories. And in 2010, we had this wonderful story that we learned about, that David and Kelly had gone with some of the players through the streets of this very city, looking for stray dogs that they could find good homes for. And they happened upon this boxer dog that was about to have puppies. And the Backuses are marvelous people, as you know. They took this stray boxer into their basement, and the dog delivered 12 puppies. They found homes for all 13 dogs. So that was a story that I thought deserved to be on national television. So in 2010, we told the story during a game, I think it was between the United States and I can't remember the opponent. So now it's 2014. The Backuses get to Russia, and the Russians had a problem that they were taking care of before we got there with pistols. It was called stray dogs. They thought it was an eyesore. But not all of the dogs were taken care of before we got there, and they couldn't very well do it once we arrived. So there were still some left over. And a couple of them were under the watchful eye of the Backuses. And they took them into their apartment at the Olympic Village. And this became very well known. And I later, before the U.S. game with Canada, I asked David, so these dogs, tell me about them. He said, well, they like to eat. And they like to have, we gave them a bath, and we're in the process of getting shots for them and getting them, the Backuses kidnapped these dogs is what happened. And we're in the process of getting them back to the States, and we'll put them up for adoption. I said, well, this is just as good as the story in 2010, so what's the message here? He said, the message is, it may be exciting to adopt a dog from an Olympic athlete, but there are dogs in shelters all across North America waiting for you too. So we got that story out as well. I am so honored to know these people.
That's great. In all the games, Doc, that you've broadcast, international competitions, Olympics, is there one game in particular that you can say that stands out, or is that real hard to point?
No, it is hard. It's been over 3,600 games. They're an awful lot of games, so no, they don't. I suppose when the women won in '98 in Nagano, the first gold medal that women ever won, and defeated Canada, that was one thing. And Sidney Crosby's goal in Vancouver when Canada won in overtime would stand out as another. Sorry. And I think, too, when you have something that happened in Boston, last spring, in Game 7, when you'd waited so long, and I think the Pietrangelo goal late in the first period of Game 7 struck me as one that changed the course of the evening in St. Louis's way, and all of you were celebrating after the rain deluge at Busch Stadium, and we showed all the rain coming down and the lightning back here, and you were all suffering so much as you were watching on the big scoreboard here from a distance. Those things stay in my memory and will for a long time.
Doc, you've won, I have to read this, you've had many awards and achievements, the Lester Patrick Award, the Foster Hewitt Memorial Award by the Hockey Hall of Fame, 3 Emmys. You're the first member of the media to be inducted into the U.S. Hall of Fame. And with all those accolades and that, how do you keep a balanced perspective in life?
I grew up in a home with 2 school teachers, and they always told me that my britches needed to be just the right size and that I didn't need to outgrow them. And they kept me monitored on that. And a lot of what Shane and what David have said about our being in church every Sunday mattered a lot. The decision I made was I was at age 8, and it was not an emotional series of meetings at our church, but I remember to this day that my mom and I spoke with the man who was conducting the meetings after, and he wanted to make sure that someone this young knew what he was doing. And so he asked me to read from 1 John chapter 1, and we shook hands, and that was it. Now, of course, then comes the living of that life that you've committed to after, and there are challenges with that you have every day. But similar to what David said, I carry a 3-ring binder that has my lineups in it, and a lot of other things, including prayers that I will probably say maybe more than one today because we have so many lineups that are different to go through. But that is a ritual that I go through that I find necessary to calm myself before every game. And the other thing, too, that I've done over the course of years, I think when you have a relationship with God, it changes your relationship with other people, and it makes you a little more concerned for them. And I carry this with me, and it doesn't necessarily make me any different than any other person, but this is a notebook that has the names of people that are of great concern to me right now that I pray for. And on this side are those that have stabilized some. I want you to see this. These are the ones who have been healed either by medical science or by God's own hand. And you notice there are a lot of names there. It's a reminder to me that God does do wonders. And it's just here as a reminder to me, and also a discipline that I have to remember other people, hopefully on a daily basis.
Well, Mike, we're short on time. We have to cut it off there, but we certainly appreciate you coming out this morning, as we do all of you men and women and young people who love the sport of hockey. And thanks so much for your witness in the broadcasting community, in the hockey world, and for coming out this morning, Mike. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. I'm sorry my voice isn't any stronger, but I do have a recommendation. If you ever have a time when your voice is not good, this is called throat coat. It's an herbal tea. I'm going to be using this a lot today. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.